Football, the beautiful game, a theater of dreams, passion, and glory. But behind the roaring crowds and breathtaking goals lurks a darker truth. What if football managers weren't just tactical masterminds, but personified the seven deadly sins? Imagine a dressing room ruled by pride, a touchline stalked by wrath, a training session led by sloth. This is no ordinary team. This is the seven deadly sins as football coaches. Let's meet them. Greed, Pep Guardiola. No coach in modern football represents greed quite like Pep Guardiola. Not the kind of greed for money or fame. Pep has those in abundance. This is a different kind of greed, a greedy hunger for control, for perfection, for being the smartest man in every room he enters. Guardiola has won over 35 major trophies, revolutionized football, and coached some of the best players the game has ever seen. But along the way, he's removed icons from his squads. Ronaldinho, gone. Eto'o, shipped out after scoring 36 goals in a treble-winning season. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, exiled after calling Pep a coward. Yaya Touré, marginalized at City. Why? Because greed isn't satisfied with brilliance unless it's under control. Pep doesn't just want success, he wants success on his terms. If a player's personality overshadows the tactical system, they're out. The spotlight must shine on his philosophy, not the individual. And nowhere was this greed more visible than the 2021 Champions League final. Chelsea versus Manchester City, a golden opportunity. But Pep overcomplicated his tactics again, fielding no natural defensive midfielder, despite Rodri and Fernandinho being fit. He tried to outsmart everyone, and in doing so, he outsmarted himself. City lost 1-0. Pep was praised by some for sticking to his ideals, but many saw it for what it was: tactical greed, a refusal to keep it simple. Even in press conferences, he admits the craving for recognition with sarcastic jabs. I need the cameras for my ego. A joke? Maybe. A confession? Probably. Pep's obsession with perfection and dominance has made him one of the most successful managers in history. But that same obsession shows what happens when greed goes unchecked. It demands everything, and it sacrifices even legends to maintain control. Pride, José Mourinho. If Guardiola is greed, then José Mourinho is undoubtedly pride. From the moment he burst onto the scene with FC Porto, proclaiming himself a special one at his Chelsea unveiling, Mourinho has always worn his pride like a suit of armor, shiny, defiant, and unbreakable. Mourinho's career is littered with incredible achievements. He won the Champions League with Porto against all odds. He delivered Chelsea's first Premier League title in 50 years. He conquered Italy with Inter, Spain with Real Madrid, and even won silverware with what many called a broken Manchester United side. But along the way, his pride often burned brighter than his brilliance. Take his time at Real Madrid. Mourinho ended Barcelona's dominance and won La Liga with a record 100 points. But behind the scenes, chaos. Fights with players like Iker Casillas, war with the media, fallouts with his own staff. His pride wouldn't allow compromise, even when it meant tearing down the locker room. He's the kind of coach who makes it us versus them. He needs an enemy to battle, a cause to fight for. And when none exists, he creates one. Journalists, referees, even his own board. When results falter, the pride remains. At Manchester United, he blamed the squad's mentality, the lack of investment, even the club's heritage. At Spurs, he famously claimed, same coach, different players, after a string of poor results. For Mourinho, failure is never internal. It's always the world conspiring against him. And yet, despite the pride, or maybe because of it, players have run through walls for him. From John Terry to Marco Materazzi, from Diego Costa to Nemanja Matic, Mourinho builds loyalty through passion and belief. But pride is a double-edged sword. It fuels greatness, yes, but it also blinds, it isolates, it causes self-destruction. Just ask the fans of Chelsea who've watched Mourinho implode not once, but twice at their club, each time leaving with trophies and scorched earth. José Mourinho is a serial winner, a tactical genius, A master motivator. But above all, he's a man driven by pride, the belief that he is always right, even when everything around him falls apart. Gluttony, Harry Redknapp. If the 7 deadly sins had a transfer deadline day, gluttony would be sat in the front seat of a Range Rover, grinning with Harry Redknapp behind the wheel. To Harry, every transfer window was a feast, a time not to strengthen, but to indulge. He wasn't just signing players. He was hoarding them like fine wine. At Portsmouth, he cooked up his greatest dish. A ragtag group of journeymen, cast-offs, and forgotten stars whipped into a team that defied the odds. And in 2008, they tasted glory, FA Cup champions. For the fans, it was heaven. But behind the curtain, a hell was brewing. The spending hadn't just been ambitious, it was reckless. Wages ballooned, debts spiraled. The club folded under the weight of its own appetite. Gluttony, it turns out, has a hangover, and Portsmouth woke up with a splitting headache. But Harry hadn't changed. He arrived as a savior. Again, he kept Birmingham in the championship, and then went shopping. 13 new players, millions spent. No vision, no balance, just bloat. The result? A 9-point deduction for breaching financial fair play. Another club, another crisis. Harry Redknapp could build you a team, no doubt, but he couldn't stop eating. And in football, as in life, gluttony always leaves you overfed, underprepared, and eventually bankrupt. Wrath, Sir Alex Ferguson. There are managers who inspire. There are managers who lead. And then there was Sir Alex Ferguson, the embodiment of wrath. Not reckless anger, but a cold, calculated fury, refined over decades and wielded like a weapon. For 26 years, Ferguson ruled Manchester United with an iron fist. He brought home 38 major trophies, including 13 Premier League titles and 2 Champions Leagues. But behind the silverware was a temper that could terrify even the most seasoned professional. They called it the hairdryer treatment. A verbal assault so fierce, it felt like standing in front of an industrial fan set to max heat. His wrath was legendary, not just in volume, but in consequence. When David Beckham's fame began to eclipse the team, Ferguson didn't hesitate. In 2003, a kicked boot struck Beckham above the eye. The tabloids feasted, but Fergie had made his point. No player is bigger than the badge. Ruud van Nistelrooy, once United's goal machine, exiled after questioning the manager's authority. Roy Keane, the captain, the enforcer, gone after criticizing teammates in an MUTV interview. Ferguson didn't just punish disobedience, he erased it. Referees feared him, journalists feared him, even the board tiptoed around him. And yet this fury wasn't chaos. It was control, it was power, and it won him everything. Sir Alex Ferguson's wrath built Manchester United's golden era, but it left a trail of fractured relationships, bruised egos, and untold stories. To lead with rage is to burn both enemy and ally. But for Ferguson, that was a price worth paying. Envy, Arsène Wenger. In 2004, Arsène Wenger stood on top of the footballing world. An intellectual mastermind from France, Wenger revolutionized English football. He introduced dietary science, training methods, and a philosophy of fluid, attacking play. His Arsenal side went an entire league season unbeaten. A feat so extraordinary, the Golden Premier League trophy was created in their honor. The world applauded Wenger. The media dubbed his side the Invincibles. He was the gentleman of football, calm, composed, and methodical. But just as he reached the peak, a new figure arrived in London, bold, brash, and unapologetically arrogant. José Mourinho's Chelsea stormed onto the scene with a different kind of energy. They weren't about elegance, they were about results. Fueled by Roman Abramovich's billions, Chelsea built a squad of steel and ruthlessness. In his first season, Mourinho won the Premier League, and he didn't stop there. Wenger the purist watched as Mourinho dominated English football through pragmatism, defensive mastery, and sheer will. For a man who had championed building from within and playing the right way, watching Mourinho win through money and grit wasn't just frustrating, it was infuriating. He began to speak out. subtly at first, then directly, calling Chelsea's tactics boring and questioning their integrity. He condemned their spending, their style, their values. But behind the criticism was something deeper, something darker. It was envy. Wenger, once the trailblazer, now stood in the shadow of a louder, newer king. He had built Arsenal's success brick by brick. Mourinho bought his mansion overnight and painted it blue. Their feud became iconic. Mourinho accused Wenger of being a specialist in failure. Wenger called him disrespectful. In 2014, it exploded physically. A touchline shove during a London derby at Stamford Bridge. It was a moment that shattered the image of Wenger's composed demeanor. The envy had boiled over. Wenger's Arsenal began to stagnate. Trophies slipped away, key players left. Meanwhile, Mourinho's Chelsea continued to thrive. Each title Mourinho won felt like a dagger to Wenger's legacy. And yet, envy wasn't just a flaw. It was fuel. It pushed Wenger to keep fighting, to evolve, to prove that beauty could still beat brutality, that philosophy could still conquer pragmatism. In time, the hostility mellowed. Both men would go on to respect each other, in their own way. But the years of bitterness left scars on both careers. Wenger's brilliance was real, but it was tainted by the shadow Mourinho cast over his final decade at Arsenal. Sloth. Zinedine Zidane. Zinedine Zidane is a footballing icon. As a player, he was elegance personified, a genius whose feet painted poetry. As a manager, he achieved what few ever have: 3 consecutive Champions League titles with Real Madrid. In just his first full season as a manager, Zidane conquered Europe. He tamed egos, balanced superstars, and created a winning machine. The pressure? Immense. The spotlight? Blinding. The success? Unmatched. But then, he walked away. Just 5 days after lifting his 3rd Champions League trophy in a row, Zidane stunned the world. He resigned, not in disgrace, not in failure, but at the very summit of football. His reason? He said the club needed a change. But behind that polite farewell was something deeper, a pattern. He returned a year later, tried to rebuild, and even won La Liga in 2020. But when things got tough, when Madrid faced a transition, when the squad aged, when the grind set in, Zidane left again. Zidane has never stayed to rebuild. He doesn't do long-term projects. He doesn't thrive in chaos. He thrives in perfection, in systems already built, stars already shining. When the U.S. national team came knocking, with money, freedom, and ambition, Zidane said none. When France, his beloved nation, didn't offer him the top job right away, he waited. Zidane doesn't chase coaching gigs. He waits for the perfect one to arrive at his feet, like a perfectly weighted pass. There's a quiet lethargy in his brilliance. A man who could be defining a new generation, instead sits on the sidelines, observing, detached. Modern managers endure pressure cookers. They adapt, rebuild, suffer, and return. But Zidane, he vanishes. He rests. Is it wisdom? A refusal to burn out like others? Or is it something darker? Lust, Capello. In football, coaches are more than tacticians. They're mentors, guides, role models, especially at the youth level, where young dreams are shaped and futures forged. But in some dark corners of the game, that sacred trust is shattered, corrupted, twisted. Capello, once a celebrated youth coach in Gabon, was entrusted with nurturing the nation's next footballing generation. He was seen as a father figure, a gatekeeper to professional careers. But behind closed doors, a different story emerged, one of lust, control, and unspeakable betrayal. Allegations began to surface, slowly at first whispered from former players, scared and scarred, then louder, more voices, more pain. Capello was accused of systematically abusing young players, exploiting their desperation to make it in football. He promised opportunities, trials, scholarships, connections, but these came with a horrifying price. Several victims described being lured into isolated rooms, being told that rituals were necessary for success, Twisted acts masquerading as mentorship. What was supposed to be a path to glory became a nightmare. In a country where football is both escape and identity, these revelations were devastating. Parents wept, fellow coaches recoiled, and a once trusted figure became the face of the ugliest kind of power abuse. This wasn't lust in the romantic sense. This was lust for control, lust for domination, lust that fed on the vulnerability of children chasing dreams. The Gabonese Football Federation was forced to reckon with a history of silence. For years, whispers had circled, but nothing was done. Capello wasn't just one rogue predator. He was a symptom of a system that protected its own and ignored the cries of the innocent. The story rocked African football. Global organizations stepped in. Investigations were launched. But for many victims, justice remains a distant dream. Football should be a sanctuary, a place where talent rises and dreams become reality. But under Capello's watch, it became a trap. Lust, unchecked, disguised as mentorship, is one of the game's darkest sins. And in Gabon, it left a scar that may never heal. Because when coaches stop protecting and start praying, the game loses more than trophies. It loses its soul. 7 legends, 7 sins, each gifted, each flawed. Because in football, like in life, greatness comes at a price. Which coach shocked you the most? Comment below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold football stories.